don't hold on to things. Like, let it go. If you really in your gut feeling feel intuitively like, I don't think so, there is obviously like, okay, sometimes when you keep going, when times are tough, that's another thing. But like intuitively, when you feel it's not in alignment anymore, let it go. It doesn't matter how many years you spent with that job or how many years you spent with this partner. Let it go if it doesn't work anymore for you.
Hey, Mile 40 fam. Are you craving a social life without the hangover? I'd encourage you to join Zero Proof. It's a lighthearted community diving into all things connection, lifestyle, and fun without the drinks. From wellness tips and product highlights to real life stories and every way to have a blast beyond the bar, Zero Proof has you covered. Be a part of the Zero Proof movement and take your social game up a notch. It's honestly one of my favorite newsletters. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for you all. Check it out. And if you enjoy it, tell them that Mile 40 sent you over. Again, check out Zero Proof. Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I hope everybody's holiday season is going well. And I am very excited for today's episode. Before we dive in, if you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. Check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious, use the discount code, and I will sign it and send it over myself. Also, take a quick second, hit 5 stars if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The reviews really help the show grow. I'm really excited for today's guest. Today, I have Lara Hemeryck. After reversing her own chronic health conditions and becoming fully medication-free, she turned her passion for health into a mission to make accurate, science-based information accessible to everybody. As a stem cell researcher and founder of PsychomWiz, a global science marketing agency, Lara combines her scientific expertise with her personal healing journey to combat the misinformation that overwhelms social media. Known for her unique talent in connecting people with the industry, Lara brings thought leaders and innovators together to collaborate and create real impact. Trusted by leading figures in the field, her goal is to unite the health community and build a healthier future for all. Lara, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we've spoken twice now. The first time we spoke, you were in Bali. Now you're in Belgium. So why don't we start off by giving the audience some insight into where are you actually from?
I am originally from Belgium, from the Flemish part. So Belgium is like French and Dutch speaking part. I'm from the Dutch speaking part.
Got it. And these days you are a digital nomad, correct?
Yes.
But that wasn't always your journey. From what I gathered around you, you redirected at one point. So let's take a step back a little bit, learn a little bit about what brought you to where you are today. So first things first, what was life like for you growing up in Belgium?
Well, I've always lived in Belgium my whole life. I did my studies here, and then up till like 2.5 years ago, I left. So now I'm 30. So around like my 20 years old. 28 years I've been in Belgium. I did some exchanges during my studies. I always felt like I wanted to go away outside of Belgium. And the fun fact is my family already saw that within me. Like they said around, when you were 7 years old, we always said Lara's never gonna stay within Belgium. She's probably, gonna move abroad and like she's not gonna stay within. And I found that really interesting that they saw that within me already as a child. So yeah, I've grown up here, studied here for the longest time, and then I decided to leave.
Got it. Tell us something that we don't know about what life like is in Belgium.
Well, what you don't know, we have the best French fries.
Really?
Yes, we do.
That's a
I
fun
always
fact.
vouch for the French fries. Everyone is like chocolate, football. To me, it is French fries.
Wow. Okay. Something I did not know. And I'm sure a lot of the audience is going to have opinions on that. So that's awesome. And was it just you and your brother growing up?
Yes, it was just me and my brother,
Got it.
and the dog is coming to say hi.
Got it. And talk to me about your parents. What did they do?
Maybe a little background. So my dad, unfortunately, he passed away when I was 8 years old, and like so it's just me, my brother, and my mom here in Belgium. My mom, she is prevention, works in prevention, basically in a sugar waffle factory, which is also something that we do really well in Belgium. Like food, if you want to come to Belgium, it's not for the weather, it's for the food. And my uncle is actually a really amazing pastry chef that all over Belgium they come to his store to actually eat
Amazing.
amazing pastry.
All
Yeah.
right. Everybody's going to take your contact information after this, so they'll know who to call when they're in
Yes.
Belgium.
Exactly. Exactly.
Um, really quick, going back to your father. So he died when you were 8. Talk to me a little bit about how that impacted you and perhaps your brother. What's the age difference between you and your brother?
My brother was 3 at the time, so there's 5 years difference. I was 8, like 7 or 8 years old. Well, how did that impact me? A lot, really. So I felt like I had to grow up really quick. I was the older sister. My mom was juggling so many jobs at the same time. There was so many things that came with it. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is like I felt like I couldn't really be in my childhood anymore, like from a young age. And that is something that I feel I became very serious very soon, let's say. Though I do have my family saying that I have a wise soul, so I already was like not really wise as a child, or at least I came across like that. But that's something that I felt I had to unlearn. Of like, I always had the idea I cannot really be truly happy because my dad is no longer here. That is something that I had to, your past does not define your future. And only at age 20 or 21, I really broke through that. And I really started to shift that mindset, and things got much better.
Did you have a lot of broader family, cousins, aunts, uncles around, or no?
No, not really.
Got
Like
it.
the after my dad passing, that side of the family kind of just um, closed off. And on my mom's side, we have a pretty small family.
Got it. Got it.
But I'm really close with them. So it's like very small, but very, very well,
Got it.
um,
Thank you for
great bond.
giving us that background. I mean, it helps us kind of paint a picture around a little bit of how things started for you and, what those formative years are so important in shaping the person you ultimately become. And you talk about, how you had to kind of take on life a little bit seriously at a younger age. You grow up quick, essentially. Like a lot of people who've been on this show who've faced different adverse circumstances at a young age, there's a similar theme of you just kind of grow up quick and you realize you have to fit this role that is perhaps missing for one reason or the other. And in your case, that's very unique to you. So, what was important to you as a youngster growing up? Was it academics at a young age? Obviously, we know the role academics is going to play when you get older, but talk to us about at a young age. Where was your focus?
I'd say I was always really focused on creative things, creating. Like my dad and my grandfather were on both sides actually were artists. So art is very, very important to me, and I was always creating. I was creating, like I was always the visionary. I was painting this picture already, taking my friends in that vision, and I realized then later on that that was one of my core strengths. So like vision, creating, that's something that was important to me. But also I really liked school. Like I've always loved it. Well, I studied for a very long time, so like I stayed very long into university. So I think it's a combination of both enjoying school, but at the same time also like blending in that creativity that really I was striving as a kid.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. So, how did that take form over perhaps your adolescent years then? Um, because I want to kind of direct us to how that creativity essentially flourished into what your career ambitions became.
Mhm. I'd say after age of, let's say, 12, I kind of went more into like doing sports, and like around 16, 18, I was like dancing and doing, I don't know if it's in English you say athleticism as well, like running and
Okay.
sprints. Like, do
Like
you say that in
endurance
English?
sports, like, yeah.
Endurance sports,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I was doing that. Then I got a really pretty bad injury on my back, which till actually only a year ago we kind of solved. So that's been impacting me quite a bit. And then yeah, I feel like I unlearned a little bit. And that's what I realized recently. I unlearned blending in the creativity into my job as well. And that combination, that realization only recently has made me flourish much more as a not only a person, but also within my business. So blending that in into your job, or just doing the things that you love to do as a child, just as a hobby, or that makes you thrive as a human being as well.
Yeah. You mentioned, the period where you were into endurance sports, whether it was running or spinning. Um, because of the premise of this show, there's a lot of runners on this. There's a lot of athletes that really listen to this show in general. Talk to me a little bit about what that period of your life kind of taught you. Talk to me about the impact of sports in general and how that kind of played a role, in the future version of you.
Yeah, I'd say it's all about like how your inner dialogue, right? Like how you speak to yourself. It's like if you believe you can do it, then you will. And so I feel like it's all about visualizing, and I think that is also an important part in visualizing what I want for my business, and all that. It's also visualizing. Like I was always in the top three at my school, for example, in running competitions. Um, and I always like imagined it in my mind already ahead of time. Plus, my inner dialogue was also very important. If I was thinking in my mind, like, oh, I'm having an off day, then I will create that reality. And I feel it's in anything in life, it's similar to that. So I'd say that is something that I learned from that period in my life.
It's interesting, despite the unfortunate circumstances of losing your father at a young age, you were equipped with, um, the entrepreneurial influence, the creative influence, and then you found, the athletic influence, which I think, when you put the three together, it's like the perfect storm for essentially accomplishing any goal you want in your adult life. And you probably didn't realize it at the time. But, like you said, your family members, considered you to be wise beyond your years. You probably knew you were onto something. Like you probably thought that no matter what you were going to do, you were going to figure out a way to succeed. So now let's kind of pivot onto, the very beginning of your professional journey. What was the goal at that point? When I was reading your bio, I can't help but think of the influence you must have had over the last couple of years, especially in a post-COVID landscape with, everybody looking for people like you for guidance. But I also kind of am curious, where did things get started before we got there from a career perspective?
Yeah. So I just want to add
Yeah.
one thing to what you just said is so true. It's like I okay, yes, I had like creativity and like the entrepreneurial mindset, but I really truly believe this comes from my mom, because my mom was always to my brother and me, both entrepreneurs now today. He also doesn't live in Belgium anymore. He's actually moved to Dubai, and he has been like very very successful within like the crypto business, has his own company, and like and started at 16 years old, like much earlier on than me. And my mom really influenced us in the most beautiful way, because she noticed within herself this doubt, maybe this inner critic, um, and she didn't want that for us. So she said to us every day, or any opportunity she could, it's like as long as you set your mind to something, you can achieve it. And so I don't necessarily question myself very easily. I'm like perfectionism is tied to that as well, but it's like this inner doubt is not necessarily super high compared to maybe what I see in others that might self sabotage you. Like for me, it's very clear: if I put my mind on something, I will achieve it, and I thank my mom every day for that, because I truly embodied what she was telling me all the time.
I love that, and I'm glad that you brought that up because, um, how do you become a multiplier of that mindset? There's a lot of people who perhaps look at someone like you and other people like yourself who have this mindset, who are so deep in their conviction of their ability to accomplish whatever it is that they set their mind to. And it's really hard to explain to people who are not of that mindset. And I think that, if there's a way to multiply it, the world would be such a such a different place. But it's a really hard concept, and maybe this is just me and you philosophizing on this podcast and kind of thinking about it. But what do you have to say about that? How can you how what are your thoughts on projecting that on the world?
I think the only thing that we can do is to share it and really motivate people. And that's what I found, what I have done. I really love writing those kind of inspirational posts on LinkedIn. So I've like been posting regularly for the last year on LinkedIn. And obviously I'm like explaining my whole business, but at the same time, I also sometimes have like some personal post on mindsets. And I notice it always ties back to, sharing this belief that I have within me and give that to my audience, and trying to give that gift that my mom gave me and then give that to others is I feel like why I'm here.
That's so interesting because it's so true and perhaps overlooked that a lot of time people don't realize all it takes is one person to read that post, to come across, whatever it is that you put out there. And that impact, you may never see it, you may never hear about it. But to your point, that's essentially how the multiplier effect works, right? Like, and I think a lot of times people go out there thinking, there's no way that I can have that impact, but really all it takes is that one time. And that's why you got to keep showing up. So thanks for kind of take us in that direction because I do think that's something to definitely reflect on. Um, all right, so now bring us back now. Talk to us about uh, perhaps like college and where you were at that point and what you were thinking career wise.
Yeah, I actually initially wanted to become a medical doctor. That was my initial goal. Then I never really thought very much about like my decision on like what do I want to become later on, honestly, which is ironic because I was always focused on the vision and like the future. Um, I just was thinking like what do I love, and like okay, I love biology. I love how things work, and what I didn't realize at the time because it's quite a new um, education really. It's and that's when I landed on biomedical sciences. So in the end, I did a master's and PhD in biomedical sciences. And so what that really is different from medical professional, sorry, like a
Yeah,
doctor,
like a doctor.
is
Yep.
really, yeah, like a doctor would more look at the overall human and identify symptoms and then identify like, okay, label it like this disease is linked to it. It's more on a like a global, like not global, um, high level maybe, versus biomedical sciences is more like how did this virus then result into this whole disease, right? It's like more the mechanism and going more deep. And that's something that has been fascinating me a lot. So I'm very happy and grateful that I found that because I absolutely love it. So I did that for study for 10 years. So I did my bachelor, then my master, and then a PhD in biomedical sciences, which was again like 5 years. But during that time, I got really sick as well. So I got very, very ill already from a young age. I was like struggling with my lungs and everything. Then in academia, I remember I wasn't really like as carefree as other students. I was very, very ill for the longest time and we couldn't really figure it out. So during that study period, I still remember if I look back at it, it's like it should be maybe like the most beautiful time of your life, your study years. But for me, it was definitely not necessarily the case versus now I feel like I'm living like the the life that I always like dreamed of.
Hey all, it's me, Bishoy. As a marathon runner and endurance athlete, I've come to understand the importance of properly fueling your body for preparation and recovery. Every day, you get a shot at success. How you start your day typically paints a picture of what the rest of the day will look like. Start your day with a super convenient, healthy, and delicious nutritional win. Meal 1 by Creatures of Habit. Overnight oatmeal packed with 30 grams of plant-based protein, chia, flax, and pumpkin seeds. Vitamin D3, omega-3s, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes made in under 1 minute. Stop wasting time or worrying about what to eat as your first meal of the day. Start with meal 1. Visit creaturesofhabit.com, creatures spelled with a K, and use code MILE40 for 15% off a one-time purchase or the first subscription order payment. You know, you just casually got a PhD. I know you talk about it so matter of fact, and we've had a couple PhDs on the show, but I think it kind of goes back to that mindset of like anything you put your mind to, you can achieve. But talk to me about was it as natural of a process as you make it sound, or were there any ups and downs to that?
Well, no, yeah, like it wasn't super like straightforward. But like you said, like I know that I could do it, so I did it. I know a lot of people believed in me, so I don't know, I felt like very supported. But there were some moments where I thought like I don't belong here. I'm like this imposter kind of like what am I doing? Will I be able to make it? These are all things that were coming up obviously because I know that after my PhD, I wanted to leave Belgium. So I knew that I had to be able to finish my degree in order, because I bought my tickets already. I was out of the country, one-way ticket to Asia, right? So I knew that I was going to leave. But there's so many requirements that come along with it. You need to have a published article at a certain time, and that's all outside of your university. It's like all independent. So you cannot really control any of it. So that was really tough. I remember like the last 6 months, I'd say that was the hardest, toughest parts. But still, I needed to get all the requirements done to obtain that PhD degree because I was like, it would be stupid to now, 2, 3 years in, to not finish this. And my PhD was also pretty successful. Like I have an IP to my name. The method that I developed was the first in the world. Like like all of that, and that made it also harder to actually leave academia because I had some really cool opportunities to get into more deeper into that. But I was really determined in no. I always said that I wanted to leave Belgium, and this is my time. Like now, I want to go. But to answer your question on like the PhD, like yeah, no, it was one of the tougher times of my life. Honestly, especially the last 6 months, I saw my family only one time. I was working 16-hour days. Just the only times that I had within my day was the only non-negotiables were a morning meditation at like 7 a.m., at 12, and at right before going to bed, and non-negotiable 7 hours of sleep. That was it, and I was working every day to get this done.
Let me ask you something because I'm always interested when I hear about stories like yours and uh, what what actually made you happy back then? Like where was what made you happy, right? Like what I think a lot of times on this show we come across a lot of people who have a lot of accomplishments, who on paper look great, and I think you and I can both agree that as much as those accomplishments are, the degree is awesome, the medal is awesome, all that stuff is great, it's actually what you learn about yourself along the way that's probably more important than the actual certificate or the medal, number one. And number two, a lot of times you find yourself going through the motions of things, and at times maybe you're questioning like, do I even really want to, like, is this what I really want to do? For example, I went to college, and when I was in college for my first year, I was a pre-med major. And I knew that if I was going to become a doctor, I was going to have a pretty stable career with a good income. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that I had no passion at all for the subject. I knew that I was probably going to be a horrible doctor, that no one should probably trust me with with taking care of them. Not in terms of bedside manner, but in terms of actually understanding, the science, and caring about the science that much. And so it took me a while to eventually say, you know what, this is not my path. Like, and I had to kind of pivot from there. So my question to you was, because you were caught in the rut of these very long work days, right? And you weren't able to see your family, and you really were just kind of so zoned in. Were you actually happy, or did you think there was something more? Or were you just too busy to even kind of think about it?
Yeah, fair. I love this question. I love this so much because that is what I realized, right? I am not happy. I am not happy doing this. Okay, it's great. And like everyone is like, whoa, your PhD is so amazing. And like companies are like super interested in working with you, and all of that is great. But what fuels me most is like then I had like this moment where I was like, okay, it's clear. I don't want to continue into academia. It's very clear. Either I become a professor and I do a postdoc and then the professor. I saw within my research lab how much stress and responsibility that was. Responsibility that I didn't really want. I was like, that will not make me happy. Then on the other hand, my other path was R&D in like a company like Pfizer or something. And I was like, um, I don't want to support that path either because of my own health struggles. And that's when I went into the concept of ikigai. I sit down with myself and I was like, okay, what makes me happy? What am I good at? What does the world need? What can I get a paycheck for? And the intersection of that was what I was really focused on for like 2 years. So within 2 years of my PhD, I had this moment of like, does this really make me happy? And then I took the other 2, 3 years to really redefine and test and tweak on like, what am I good at? What do I love? And I trialed. So I was like, okay, very clear. I love arts. Let's bring that back. From my childhood, I kind of lost that. I will become a scientific illustrator. So I became the scientific illustrator of the lab, then of the department. Then I created like a logo of the department at my research lab. So I became like the visual person before anything went to publicity or anything visual or messaging, like how to make a message come across visually, but also through words. These are all my skills, right? And I did that within my job at that time, not realizing that that will become like my agency. But I was doing that, and then I was like, okay, scientific illustrator doesn't really get me a lot of money, and it doesn't really make me happy. So I pivoted all the time. So I would say, in your mind, you create very often. This is it. This is my purpose. This is my goal. This is what's gonna make me happy. But then, in reality, if you do it, it's often not the case. So you learn along the way what you're good at, what the world needs. Like I would always say to people, don't just think about it, just go with it and do it. So that's what I did in like the last 2 years of my PhD. And what kept me going during these really long days, which was like the last 6 months of it, is because I knew what I wanted to do approximately. I knew I wanted to leave Belgium. I knew I wanted that digital nomad life and have location independence. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I would get there by trial and error. And
Got it.
that's what kept me going.
I love that because it's so practical. And I really hope that, the listeners tuning into this episode rewind just a couple, like 2 minutes, and kind of like think about that, right? If you put it down on paper and you do that kind of exercise, you are putting a scientific spin of trial and error on how to seek out something, or how to see through something so important, probably the most important thing you'll ever do in your life, right? And I can attest to that too, on different at different junctures of my life. I kind of went through it. I would say 4 years ago, after Break Barriers was published, I thought, all right, I'm gonna be a speaker. Like, I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna speak on stages, and that's gonna be me. And I thought, like, I found it. And then I started Mile 40, and I realized, like, this was a tweak on speaking in a different way. I'm still behind a microphone, but in a different way. And I, I didn't know at the time, but here we are, like, 2.5 years later. And I'm like, oh, like this was it. This was what I meant by speaking. And I think those little tweaks go such a long way. And I think all we have to do is kind of be open to it, right? Like you have to be open to the fact that it may not look and feel the same way that you envisioned it when you first started, on that journey. But if you open up and you give yourself the chance to experiment, you may find that you are good at something you never even knew, would take you to where you want to go. So thank you for calling that out. I think that just so practical and so important for the audience to lean into.
Thank you so much. And also, I would add, like, don't hold on to things. Like, let it go. If you really in your gut feeling feel intuitively, like, I don't think so. There is obviously, like, okay, sometimes when you keep going, when times are tough, that's another thing. But like intuitively, when you feel it's not in alignment anymore, let it go. It doesn't matter how many years you spent with that job or how many years you spent with this partner. Let it go if it doesn't work anymore for you.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I forgot which guest we had on, but we had a guest who, kind of talked about the same notion, they talked about it in terms of like it's just a chapter. Like everything is just a chapter in the book of your life, and if you can take on that mindset and understand, when to turn the page from one chapter to the next, you'll understand that you're building a bigger storybook, right? And it's a hard concept in practice sometimes, but when you start to really incorporate it and stick to it, um, you'll see how freeing it is, in terms of allowing you to take the next step in your journey. So I think that's a very important call out. So now tell us, where did we go from there with regards to taking the next steps to get to where you are today?
So during that last 6 months, I started spontaneously applying at remote first companies because it became very clear to me that I wanted location independence. I even considered, and that's a very cringy thing to say, I even thought, like, why not become a travel influencer? Or, like, no, honestly, I thought that. So I did some modeling back in the days. So it's like, I'm good with photos, I'm good with art, I'm good with creativity. I can do this, but damn, so much work goes into that. Kudos to people who do this because it's extremely tiring. So it's like I tried, I even took courses on how to become a travel influencer. Um, but anyway,
I love that.
yeah, I was like, I just want location independence first and foremost. That was my biggest goal, where I thought that is so in alignment with me. Okay, so how did I go then from there? Then I was like, you know what? I studied for so long. What within my studies did I really enjoy? What am I good at? And then again, like doing that exercise again and again and again. And then I realized I'm really good at conveying a message through visuals and words in a very easy way so that different audiences can resonate with it. I could speak clinical language very easy and get a message across, but also like my friends and family, because I reversed my own health issues in the most stressful time in my PhD, which is like everyone is like, it's stress, you have to relax. But during that most stressful time, I became completely medication free. So a lot of people were interested in what did you do, what did you apply, and so translating that from like the articles that I was reading to layman was something I really enjoyed doing. So I was like, ooh, you know what? I want to make a big impact. I want to not go into like the drug and clinical world, but I want to go more in the preventative space. So what I did was, okay, I want to make a big impact. I want to make impact 1 million lives in the first year of becoming like a freelancer. I don't even know what I was doing or how to label it, but I want to be digital nomad, and impacting 1 million people, translating preventative health so that people can become the CEO of their own health, just like I did. because I found a lot of miscommunication, confusion. But because I was that researcher, I could dig into the science, get right information from wrong information, seeing that a study was maybe more for males in 18-year-olds and not women or whatever. So, long story short, I kind of wanted to make that impact and shift. And then I was like, okay, the way to do that is to help the people who I followed, the people who I read the books from, the people who helped me, the big voices out there. So I spontaneously applied at like 30 different companies, remote first within preventative health. And I said, well, I know this is very new, but this is what your company needs. This is how I can get you there. And this is why you have to create this job for me. Um, and that will bring you there. 10 out of these 30 wanted to hire me, which was amazing. So that is kind of how I shifted, like, oh, there is actually need. There is like, I tested the waters a little bit of like, okay, this is cool. But then no one was as flexible with the time zones since I wanted to travel within Asia first. They all were US companies. Anyway, so I was like, okay. Then one of these calls, there was one uh, CEO who was like, I will take the call with you. Actually, for full transparency, I don't have a job for you. But he took like 45 minutes of his time, and he's like very like incredibly successful company. Took 45 minutes of his time to basically mentor me through that call. And he was asking me all the right questions, saying like, what do you really want? And at the end, he was like, you have to start something on your own. You got this. And so I had that, like, someone saw me at that moment. And that's when I was like, okay, let's do it. And then that's when I pivoted into first a freelancer. 6 months later, I was hired for like 8 days a week, but nobody knew. And then I was like, I need some more help. I posted a video online, went completely viral. People all over the world applied spontaneously to work with me. Little did I know, I ended up hiring 5 out of these people that applied. And then I grew very quickly into like the team that we are today. So it all just went super, super quickly. And this is only 2 years ago now. Today we're like a team of 10 people.
Talk to me
Yeah, I
about
feel like I fast forwarded the story really, really quickly, but yeah, any
no.
questions?
I actually, you hit on something really important, and this is something that I can relate to, and that I've talked about and written about several times. Talk to me about the importance of that mentor or that person who took that call with you, because I had a similar experience that I talked about in Break Barriers with someone that I kind of had a professional relationship with, but not that close of a relationship with. And you said something that was really, really important because I felt the same exact way. You said, he saw me. Like, he saw you where you were. He saw what you knew you had, but you needed someone to reflect back on you to say, like, yeah, you can do this. And sometimes that voice needs to come from a person like that, not from your parent, not from your best friend, not from the person that you sit next to all day, but from the person who you perhaps didn't know saw it in you, because it's that reflection of yourself that really jolts you forward. Would you agree that that interaction probably was the blossoming of where you are today?
100%. And I didn't realize it ironically at the time, but then later on, I actually reached out again and saying like, hey, that call was so impactful. Like, look where I am right now. I'm hiring people. And that's when actually he became my mentor and now actually a good friend. So it's, yeah, also really important to also thank people. I just want to remind anyone to do that. Reminder for myself as well. Like, if someone impacts you in any way, thank them.
What year did you start?
I started right after my PhD defense, which was June 1st, 2022.
Oh, June 1st, 2022. Okay. I know I kind of alluded to this earlier, but given the premise of what it is that you're doing, did COVID play a role in all this at all?
COVID, you mean like having my agency? right now.
Yeah, and really when you think about like the mission that you're filling here, right? When you think about chronic conditions, becoming medication free, you talk about leveraging scientific expertise to combat misinformation, right?
Mm,
Like that's very in line with the narrative that we saw worldwide. And if COVID has nothing to do with this, that's fine. But I am interested to see if there's any sort of relationship here.
no, not really, to be honest.
Okay.
But COVID did force me to slow down, and it's during that time when I was doing all the ikigai concepts, basically of like what do I want in my life. So it for me it was a great time to actually pause um, and just focus on that.
Got it. When you think about what you've probably seen out there in terms of misinformation, what are some of the what are what are some of the fun stories you have for us?
Oh gosh, there's just so much crap out there. You can tell whenever it's like a researcher or not, like someone, and most of the time it's not. It's a very unique skill to have to be and a researcher that is able to explain things in an easy way. It's very often that you don't have both. So most of the time within news, depending, obviously check your sources, but sources that are linked are just overclaiming, are not even the right study, are rat studies, so not even human studies. So they then say like, oh, this will solve your life, and then it's the thing is, people want this one solution or this one thing that will solve everything for them. And so that's another, like a whole other problem. So, that's also why the communication is directed in that way. Or, the time span, attention span is just so short these days. You have to sometimes be very radical with your hooks or overclaiming of like, oh, wow, what is this to stop the scroll? And that just causes a lot of problems in my eyes because people will think that it's promised that this thing will solve everything for them, but long term they will try it and then give up, and maybe give up on their health altogether because they're like whatever. So it causes a lot of troubles, all this misinformation.
I can only speak to the US. I can't speak to worldwide, but I do feel like in the US there's a severe mistrust for a lot of the information that's being, shared around because there's you know, we can go talk for hours about the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry and what the thought is there and the conspiracy theories, what's true, what's not true. I couldn't even begin to explain. I could tell you from a personal level, I I don't really believe much of the stuff that's being put in front of me, and I feel like I have to make a lot of my own independent decisions. And a lot of times that kind of like takes everything back to basics, right? Like around what it is that I'm eating, what it is that I'm consuming, what it is that I feel like is most important to take care of myself holistically. Um, but at times I do wish there was just the truth in front of me, so that way like I could validate the decisions that I make. Can you speak to a little bit around? I'm guessing you're working on a global lens, right? You're working all over the world right now.
Yeah, so mainly my clients are based in the US. My team is also in the US, so I'm very familiar with like the issues that are within the
Okay.
US. Yeah, and then also Europe as well. Yeah.
Is it better outside the US or is it the same?
The misinformation.
The level of misinformation and I guess the corporate greed that might be playing into it.
I guess in the US, Europeans are a little bit more subtle in a way. So the communication style within the US is very forward, very direct, very flashy. You have to grab the attention very, very quickly. Whereas in Europe, I'd say this is a little bit more subtle. It really depends. Like I'm working as well with a supplement company within Sweden, and they have like regulations on top of the European regulations within Sweden. So they are very like it depends as well within Europe on how free you are to say certain things about your product to the people about studies. So I'd say yeah, in that sense, it might be a little bit more in the face and overclaiming within the US from what I've seen.
And again, speaking from an American lens, it feels like anytime I go to Europe, it feels as if though Europeans are living a much healthier, holistic lifestyle than we are here. And look, I'm talking about from as someone from a large metropolitan city, like New York. But I remember, wherever I was in Europe, whether it was Italy or Spain or Greece, it feels like even though sometimes you see people smoking cigarettes a lot more frequently than you do here in the US, it still feels like they are healthier than we are here. Based on what the work that you've done, can you speak to that? Is there any insight that you can give us?
I'd say you've been to the best places within Europe, like Spain and Italy and Greece. They all have very amazing diets. Italy has amazing regulations with their food. They really try to preserve ancient techniques, to not like cook the pasta super fast, or like the pastas that you find within packages are much higher quality compared to anywhere else. And I'd even argue that within maybe Belgium specifically as well, it's like I notice a difference whenever I go to Italy and I eat a pizza versus here, or whenever I eat a pasta there in Italy versus here. So even within Europe, there are differences. As well, within the food, there is a lot of like bad quality oils and preservatives within products within Belgium as well, versus Italy, it's much less. So
Yeah. Sorry, go
it's
ahead.
it's within Europe as well very different.
That's funny. I mean, like, because yeah, a lot of Americans go to Italy and they say all I did was eat pizza and pasta, and I came
Yes.
back and I lost weight.
Yeah,
Eh,
exactly. Like I had no issues with my extremely bad IBS back in the days. And I was eating there because I thought I couldn't handle gluten at the time. I was eating like vegetables, but that was causing me issues at the time. And so I was like, I will eat at least one pizza, and I felt the best of the whole holiday. So it's really different in different places within Europe as well. Yeah.
Lara, when all is said and done, and you look back on your body of work, let's just even say to today, what are you most proud of today?
I like in my gut that just sparked within me. I'd say I'm very proud that through the work that I'm doing, I inspire people, or through the work and the content that we put out, or even with myself, I inspire people to get into action. Whatever it may be, action within shifting their mindset, or taking action for their own health, just getting better in touch with their mind, body, and soul.
Got it. And then longer term, right? When you think about, taking your career through the end of your lifetime, is there a specific, I don't want to say like a specific goal or a specific accomplishment that you want, but if you can make an impact on, one part of this broader ecosystem, what part would it be, right? Like if you could say I live my life and I've at least made people think a little bit harder about this, or made people really consider that maybe we're not doing this right, or that we need to see changes in this part of the field. Um, you know, I feel like sometimes when you take on a role such as yours, you kind of take on this like this mentality. You're kind of going to war in a sense, right? Because you are going to war against misinformation. You are going to war against big bad corporations sometimes, or big bad influencers sometime. And like you said, like you need to understand how to kind of close the chapter and move on when that time comes. You're not going to be able to beat everybody. You're not going to be able to take down every single piece of misinformation. You are not going to be able to battle against some of the biggest companies. You might try your entire life to, but there's definitely going to be some pushback at times. So if
Mhm.
you can have an impact on one part of this broader ecosystem, what would it be?
I would love to shift that from focusing on taking down the the bad guys, let's say the misinformation. My whole mission is not necessarily to like prove that this information is wrong, and then and share the right one. It's more so through this line of work that I'm doing. It's exactly what I actually already shared, and it's what I'm doing, and I just want to develop that more. Is really to spark that um, initial light within a person, thinking like I can do this, which comes back again to what my mom sparked within myself, right? It's like no matter what I will do, I will be able to do it and I will figure it out. I want people to feel that through whatever I do, whatever I touch, through my line of work. That is my biggest goal, to really get better in touch with mind, body, soul. That is at my core what I wish.
I love that. Lara, I think that's, honestly the perfect thing to close out on, right? You bring us back to childhood, you bring us back to the role that your mother played, especially given the circumstances of losing your father at a young age. And I'm very proud to have you on here because you do bring a different perspective. You've shown us that you can accomplish anything you put your mind to, and that you can own the narrative. You can write the remaining chapters of your life, and it's okay to pivot. It's okay to change the page and to turn the chapter. And I think that mindset is going to guide you through the rest of your journey. And I want you to know how impactful your work is, because I feel like as an entrepreneur, sometimes it's really hard to gauge the value of the work that you're putting out there. But you and I have had a few short conversations, and in looking at the work that you're doing, and now I'm getting to know you on a personal level, I can tell you that I am incredibly grateful that people like you exist and are doing the work that you're doing. Because someone like me wants to see this change. Someone like me wants the world to be better for my children. And I think without people like you, that's not possible. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for letting us in on your mission.
Thank you so much. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.